Well, this is a really interesting topic that we're coming up into for Forum 8, and that is the topic of false confessions. And I know that, for example, you guys already have a tremendous source for information on wrongful convictions, and that is Dr. Ramsey. And he teaches a course in wrongful conviction. So I would strongly recommend that you take that course. Another area you've probably already seen from me is this Innocence Project. There's actually one national Innocence Project, and then a number of states has started forming their own Innocence Projects. And what they do is they comb through all the convictions of people that are sitting in prison and try to pull out the cases where people are wrongfully convicted for various reasons. Sometimes it can be false eyewitness testimony, it can just be a mistake, it can be an error by a witness, or it can be so bad that one gang member is trying to implicate a private citizen, an innocent person, to take attention off of their gang when in fact they're the ones that maybe committed the murder or the crime. And so this kind of misdirection. There's a number of cases out there, and a lot of times this type thing does not rise to the level of the U.S. Supreme Court, but I am going to share some of these cases with you. There's a case in 1993, it's called the West Memphis 3. In that case, sadly, this is in Arkansas, actually. West Memphis is in Arkansas. And there basically were 3 8-year-old boys found dead. And then for some reason the Arkansas police centered their attention on a guy named Damian Echols. That's Echols. And he was soon charged with the murder along with another guy, a friend of his, Jason Baldwin, and a third guy named Jesse Miskelly Jr. And it's interesting that this case went on for a long time, and the one guy, this Jesse, was a mentally disabled 16-year-old, and so they wrapped this guy up in this along with these other people, accused him of murder, and put him in prison. Put all 3 of them in prison. Actually, Damian Echols was sentenced to death. Jason and Jesse received a life sentence. Interestingly, the case has been basically reversed. There needs to be a new hearing according to the Arkansas Supreme Court because DNA evidence has indicated that these 3 guys were not involved in the case, and basically there was a forced confession from this Jesse, the 16-year-old mentally disabled kid, and that implicated the 2 other guys, and so that was the basis for the conviction. The jury accepted the statement of a mentally disabled kid, even knowing that, and that's how they convicted the person and put him on death row. So now, because of DNA evidence, and that's what we're finding in many, many cases, over 325, something like that, cases have been found to involve some kind of incorrect procedures, whether it's a false confession, whether it's some kind of wrongful conviction, false testimony by an eyewitness, bad lineup procedures are another one, where people identify defendants in lineups and they're completely mistaken, but the jury accepts that, and so it's a very interesting problem. The other part of it is that of this 325 or so innocent people that Innocence Project has freed, they say that 25%, so what would that be? 4 into 325, what's that go? For, what is that, 8s? So we're talking 80 people that are involved in being on death row or in prison for long periods of time, life sentences, based on a false confession. by someone, either by they themselves or by another person that's somehow involved in their case, co-defendant, let's say. And you may say, well, how can this be? How could somebody ever basically confess to something that they didn't do? And so all too often there's just so many different reasons why this can happen. Here's another case, Marty Tankleff, and that's Tankleff, 17-year-old boy accused of killing his parents. And this was in their home in Long Island, New York. Basically, they had an unsigned written confession. It's in quote marks. It's just a written out paper. I've had cases where the police write out the paper and claim that that's what the person said, not signed by anybody. And it's not in the defendant's own handwriting. It's in the police officer handwriting. In fact, it's interesting, but if you want to look at your Miranda warning case, Miranda's confession was a written confession from a man who could not read or write. 6th grade education, Mexican heritage, Hispanic in his background, did not really understand the English language very well. Yet here is this neat, nice written confession with all the big words out of the Arizona statutes that were necessary to convict him for rape. And so this is another one of these kind of cases where they kept this kid locked up for hours and hours. Basically, a detective with a checkered past who'd been in a lot of trouble for assaulting, suspects and different things. And so basically, Marty was convicted of killing his parents, sentenced to 50 years to life, and served 18 years in maximum security prison for a crime he did not commit. Okay, so that's a New York case. Another one, Jeffrey Des Kvick, and that's spelled Deskovic. And this is another case in 2006 where Jeff Des Kvick was indicted with murder charges along with rape and possession of a weapon. And later he was found to be innocent based again on DNA. And so, as we go down through these, just about every one of them involves a later finding based upon DNA evidence that clears the person. And I know that there's some of you out there, DNA is like 99% effective. Witness testimony is considered about 40% effective, okay? And if you get some kind of a duress-based confession, that's not very effective. Sounds like about 5% of all people in prison, which is 1 million people plus, are innocent, according to Dr. Ramsey. So you take 5% of 1 million, what's 5% of 1 million? Well, we know that 10% of 1 million would be 100,000. So half of that would be 50,000 people in the United States sitting in prison. Well, a lot of you would say, well, that's okay because, that means that we got the other 1.2 million people in prison, even though we made a few mistakes. Well, the problem with that attitude is, what if that's your son? What if that's your husband? What if that's you? What if that's your wife? I mean, people get falsely accused in this country all the time. It's not a perfect system. And here again, I mean, a lot of it, I think, goes back to a lack of collaboration among all the parties, lack of trust between police, the courts, probation, the prisons, everybody that's involved in the system. And so I think that's one of our big issues that we need to kind of try to work on in terms of cross-training between all these different departments to try to work better together. Well, I could go on and on about the number of cases, but if you want to, just go to the site www.falseconfessions.org/cases/ It's a line, then it says the, and then another line, and then exonerated. I don't know what you call that, but there's a little line in there between like cases and the, and like a dash line. Okay, it's not down on the bottom, it's in the middle. Okay, so if you want to look at some of these, I mean, you can look at them. But another one, just real quickly, Norfolk 4, 1997, Omar Ballard raped and murdered 18-year-old Michelle Bosco in her apartment in Norfolk, Virginia. That's a big naval station area. It's all, you know, kind of a seafaring area. Ballard has admitted, continues to confirm that he's the one that committed this crime. And yet, even though, you know, he continues to say that he did this, they arrested 4 other guys that had nothing to do with it. And so finally released from prison. There's a whole program on this on PBS Frontline. Just go Norfolk 4 when you get to the search box after you Google PBS Frontline. Excellent, excellent presentation on this, and it'll be a good thing for you to look at. I'll probably post this in addition to my video. So look at this. One of the police detectives finally in the Norfolk 4 case was actually convicted. And so they're asking for a full pardon for everybody involved, except, of course, Ballard, who's always maintained that he's the one that did it. Well, there's even more cases. There's cases in which 5 juveniles were convicted of raping Central Park jogger. Later turned out to be that these confessions were based on 40 hours of interrogation, 40 hours in a row. Those 40 hours where they don't allow you to go to the bathroom, those 40 hours where you don't get to call your mom, those 40 hours where you don't get to eat, those 40 hours where you don't get to rest. You're constantly being questioned continuously, and you're a kid for 40 hours. And so then later on, DNA tests found the real rapist, found the real guy. And so then finally they did the DNA on the youths, the 4 youths, well, I guess 5, and later cut them loose and said, no, these guys couldn't have done it. So it's just amazing when you look at these, and it just goes on and on and on. So something to consider. I mean, we always need to be looking at making the system better, making it more effective. And it's just something, a little germ I want to put in your mind that, you know, the things we take for granted don't always work that way, especially for minorities. And I think, you know, folks, you live in a small town, you kind of take life for granted, but other people don't have it that easy. So I'm just trying to give you a balanced view of some of these things. Some of you seem to have already made up your mind on some things, but I'm just trying to challenge you, you know, to dig deeper, think more about this. And that's not to say that I'm right all the time. I know that, you know, we need police, we need good police work. You know, I honor police, obviously served in the military. I'm not no bleeding heart liberal. I'm just saying that there's 2 sides to every story, and we need to spend enough time on both sides of that coin. So just something to consider. I'd like you to look at it, and we will post this along with the different videos that I've made today. So, alrighty, well, that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed it. Check it out, and we'll be back later with something new.